here's proof that Tesla has too much demand. So what you're looking here is Model 3 order page in Canada. And no one is really talking about this because for you to know and see this, you have to be in Canada. MSRP is $59,990 Canadian dollars. But in Canada, you can get a $5,000 federal subsidy for the vehicle, which is applied at the point of sale, so you actually pay less out of pocket. And also in British Columbia, you can now actually get up to $4,000, not just $3,000. So if you combine those two, it would be $9,000 per one vehicle. But we really want to focus on a $5,000 federal rebate here. And this is where it becomes very clear that Tesla has no demand issue at all, that it actually has too much demand, because check this out. The only problem with the rebate is that MSRP of a car has to be less than $55,000. However, higher price trims of these vehicles up to a maximum of MSRP of $65,000 will also be eligible for purchase incentives. This article was written in April, and before the maximum MSRP limit was $55,000, so the starting MSRP had to be at $45,000. And guess what? Tesla used to have Model 3 standard range, limited range, MSRP of $44,999, so that customers could take advantage of that $5,000 rebate. It used to be that you would come to the website here, and I did this before. You come here, you choose Model 3 rear-wheel drive, and there was a box that you could tick, which would limit the range to 150 kilometers, which is basically about 100 miles only. Now, I would have a hard time to imagine that there were a lot of people that actually bought that version because the range was so low. But the only point of having that car was so that MSRP starts at a lower price, and then customers can actually get the model that they want. Like, for example, this Model 3 rear-wheel drive with 430 kilometers in range, which is equivalent to 267 miles of range. But Tesla does not offer that lower range vehicle anymore, and it would be so easy for them to do, to have this other option and then strip off a lot of other features just with software, and have that low MSRP so you can qualify for the rebate basically without doing much, just limiting a lot of features with software. For example, limit the range. For example, do not have any autopilot in the car. Or limit, for example, let's say, no navigation maybe for you. I don't know, or maybe speakers would not work, something crazy like that. So then no one would ever buy that vehicle. So you can push all of the sales to the trim that you actually want at the price that you actually want. This model would still be $5,000 under the $65,000 maximum MSRP. So this would be so easy for Tesla to do. All it takes is just a quick software thing to lock this in. As we know, Tesla is just as much a software company as it is a car company. So doing this software update that limits cars' capabilities would be so easy to do, and it's just so easy to increase demand with this rebate. So tell me, explain to me how Tesla has not done this. This has been out for basically half a year now, more than that, and Tesla has not taken advantage of this yet. The only two ways that I could explain this is, number one, Tesla does not know about this, which they clearly do because they were taking advantage of all of this before. Or number two is Tesla is so busy and occupied with so much demand that they don't care about this. Canada is not exactly a very big market, but it's not exactly very small either. And it's not like you have to ship cars all the way to the other part of the world. It's not like you're shipping them from, let's say, US to Argentina, which would be, you know, quite a bit further than shipping them to Canada. So if management is actually concerned about the demand, mark my words, they would be taking advantage of that immediately. And if their concerns, which these demand concerns started earlier this year, if that was really the case, then those changes would have been implemented probably in April or May, or definitely in the beginning of the summer, but we don't see that. Not to mention that in Canada and the US, you still cannot even order Model 3 long range. It's not that you just need to wait for like a year or two to get one. You can't even order one. You can't even place an order, is how far the waiting lines are and how much demand for Tesla vehicles there are. While Tesla is delivering cars to most places that matter, so if you look at this map, you will see that there are some places in the world that barely have any chargers and definitely basically no superchargers. I'm not saying that, for example, India, of course, Tesla has not entered yet. And then we look right here and there's not much we see in terms of Tesla chargers. And when I zoom in into the middle of Europe, there are clearly some areas that have a lot more chargers than other areas. For example, I personally did not even consider getting a Tesla until I knew I can go from Vancouver to Whistler, which is a popular destination for many people to go on vacation, for example, snowboarding, skiing, stuff like that. And if I can charge comfortably, I did not even want to consider getting a Tesla vehicle. With better charging, demand can certainly be improved. For example, I am still a little bit uncomfortable going to Whistler, let's say around Christmas or New Year's, because that's when people go there. And that was still, even when we got our Tesla, that was a big friction point for us personally. I am from the Baltic states, and as you can see here, these are, by the way, not poor countries. People have money here. Definitely not as rich as, for example, Germany. But how many chargers do you see? This also includes destination chargers, not just superchargers. And then I lived here. I was not even remotely considering getting a Tesla because of lack of superchargers. There's just none, basically. So if you build more chargers, there will be more demand. And even over here in Vancouver, there are some spots there, if you go at a certain time, then people are charging. You might need to wait for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes for your spot. Usually not, but it's not perfect. So Tesla, when they build more superchargers, there is going to be more demand. I'm a big fan of Troy. There is one flaw in Troy's methodology, how he calculates the backlog, and that is just to look at how much does it say on Tesla's website you would have to wait for the car to arrive, and based on that he calculates the backlog for Tesla vehicles. And if you looked back and compared actual wait times of those given a time of order, actual would be much longer. For example, our Model X, we ordered that more than a year ago in the summer, and it was supposed to arrive in like a few months. Now it's been basically a year and a half, and we are still supposed to wait for another half a year. So I don't know how much we can trust those numbers here. But I do understand the need to keep consistency in the calculation method. I fully understand that. I'm fully on board with that. You just have to understand, you cannot take that model and say there is a demand problem because this model says so, and definitely the model is not wrong. There's 0% chance that this model is wrong. Time and time again in business, what I see is I like to look at numbers. I like the scientific approach, but the problem is oftentimes our models are just not good enough to determine what is going to happen. So if you just think a little bit, instead of being precisely wrong when you use numbers, if you just think a little bit, you will be roughly right or less wrong than if you just use hardcore numbers without thinking, oh, where do these numbers come from? How are they calculated? Is there anything behind this model that could be wrong? Maybe the model is built on a flawed approach. So you can't take the model with this kind of methodology and assume it is always going to be correct. It's just a guess, basically. I made a video maybe 6 months ago, maybe more now, titled Why I Would Not Get Our Model 3 Long-Range All-Wheel Drive Again. And that was because of the suspension. It's so stiff. If I put my head against the headrest, I'm not kidding about this, I get a headache. So, or almost like a tiny, and I do mean very tiny, concussion. Because it's so stiff. When you go through even through surface that is not perfectly even, you feel every single little imperfection in the road. So I never put my head against the headrest, which is a little bit of a safety concern, because if you get rear-ended, you will have a whiplash. I am absolutely not a fan of that suspension. I hate it. So I made a video that I don't like that suspension. The Model X, though, is great. So hence, we're waiting for the Model X. But now knowing that the suspension has been improved, I don't know. Maybe the Model Y is just fine. And I, as a Tesla stock investor, I want to try and own all of the vehicles so I can see how the ownership experience is like, so that I am very familiar with the product. And the Model X is not really an important car to Tesla as a company because it's so low volume. That car is just more for enjoyment, but, you know, knowing the product, understanding the product comes first. And before, I was not willing to... I know that the Model Y suspension is even worse than the Model 3, so I was like, I don't want to own that car. That sounds like a bigger headache, no pun intended, than it already has been. And how does this affect demand? Well, for me, as an investor, I like seeing this because this was an actual huge, horrible, bad problem. And at first, the suspension, by the way, when we got the car, I didn't notice that there is a problem with it. Only until maybe a few months later, I noticed every time I get in the car and drive, I don't feel well after a little while. I get those headaches. And then I realized, oh, it's because of the stiff suspension and the backs and the seat. The cushion of the seat is not that soft where my head goes. So that's the cause. So my thinking was, in, long term, everyone is going to realize the suspensions. It's just horrible. And that would be not good for the demand. But I had trust in Tesla and Elon Musk that they would fix a problem. If they see that there is a problem, they're going to fix it. And that's why I invest in Tesla stock, because they innovate. They change the product, they update the product. If they see there's an issue, they fix it. It takes time to fix it, but they do get there. And currently, I only have one major issue with the car, which is not that bad anymore. The suspension was really the only thing that came to me as a potential deal breaker. The next thing is the windshield wipers. Oh, I hate the automatic windshield wipers. They are getting better, though. With every update, they get a little bit better. But sometimes, when it starts to rain, it either goes way too fast, or it just doesn't do anything, or it's way delayed. occasionally I had drives, and those drives are more often now than before, where it is just perfect. When we initially had the car, that would happen so rarely, but it has improved with software updates. So that's one more thing that they need to work out. And a simple fix would be, instead of going through the menus and having to adjust the speed of the windshield wipers, you just give me a button like in any other car, and then I don't need to look away when it's raining and I can barely see the road anyway, and I need to pay extra attention on the road, so I don't want to look away for like 10 seconds to go through the menus to turn on the correct setting for windshield wiper. I don't want to do that because it's not safe. They could just give me a button, physical button, to do that. That's the only real issue that I have with the car, assuming that the suspension is fixed. And assuming that with time, the software would get better, and maybe it's a sensor problem with the windshield wipers. I have confidence. Long term, we will fix it. It will be no problem. Everything else about the car, it's just small inconveniences. I guess the next biggest issue would be every time I want to adjust the temperature, it's still a little bit clumsy. I would somehow like because pretty much every time I get in the car, I want to adjust the temperature of the car, and the automatic setting, it just never gets it quite right for what I want. And I observe other people that are in the car as well, let's say on the passenger seat, and I see them also changing the temperature most of the times when we get in the car. So that's not just me being picky. So I'd like those buttons to be somehow bigger so that I could sort of basically adjust the temperature without having to look at the screen. Maybe if they could put it like right in the very corner. So if you want to just decrease the temperature, you could sort of do it without looking at the screen, because you would know it's right in the corner and you're just sort of like trying to touch there, or maybe somehow slide it. I don't know. They have to figure something with that. I'm not a fan of that. But generally, everything else about the car is better than other vehicles. For example, let's take the new Mercedes EQE SUV. Guess what? It has no frunk. What's their excuse for not having the frunk? Well, we have a HEPA filter in our car, and it's all-wheel drive, and it's a fast car. Well, guess what? This is an even faster car. It has a frunk, and it has that HEPA filter. Every Model Y now comes with this filter. So if you look just here, you can see a regular car, the filter is just not as good. Now, sadly, Model 3 is not big enough to fit a big enough HEPA filter to make the bioweapon defense mode work, but Model Y does have a space, and now it comes standard. These are best-selling cars in Germany in the month of September. No wonder why not a single Mercedes vehicle is on the list, but we do have Tesla Model Y as #1. And the second one is Volkswagen Golf. And the Model Y is almost 3 times as expensive. This is in USD. Mind you, this is a 2021 model though. And in US, Model Y is $65,000 MSRP. Of course, everyone wants a Cybertruck, me included. And there's another Model Y change, which is very welcome for the rear seats. Tesla stock today finished 7% up, which makes me just a little bit sad because I'm still buying a lot more. And now I have to pay 7% more. Too bad. Thank you for watching this video. Watch this video next, 48 reasons why I only own Tesla stock. Thank you for watching.